Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Digital Law News. I'm Amelia Davies, an apprentice solicitor at Digital Law UK, and I'm joined by my colleague, Peter Wright, and we're just going to be running through some news stories that have been hitting the headlines this week. So I'll pass over to Peter to introduce himself, and then we will get started.
Thanks, Amelia. My name is Peter. I'm a lawyer and the managing director at Digital Law, and we've got some quite interesting high-profile articles to discuss with you this week. So I will pass back to Amelia to kick us off.
Thanks, Peter. So starting looking at the legal system itself. So a flawed legal IT system has a mind of its own, Staff have been warning. So a £300 million technology upgrade for criminal courts has been described as a disaster by a senior judge who says it is a car crash about to happen. The so-called Common Platform is a cloud-based system designed to replace outdated software programs in criminal courts. It's meant to allow judges, the Crown Prosecution Service, the police and the prison service to find case details in one place. However, so far it is not quite all that it seems. So I'll pass over to Peter to go through this in more detail.
Thank you, Amelia. I mean, with this story, it really is a matter of where to start, and it really does leave you sort of with your head in your hands. Brief background. So the Ministry of Justice, listeners might be aware, embarked on a court closure programme over the last few years. The idea being we'll make all these savings by closing all of these drafty old courts that no one needs anymore, and instead we'll have justice systems that run more seamlessly online. So the idea was to move over to greater sort of use of law tech, legal technology to assist the functioning of justice online. And then, of course, this was in theory accelerated even more by the pandemic switch to more digital working 2 years ago. However, that's the overall thought. There were lots of reports done on, oh, this is where we need to be careful on this, but here are where some of the possibilities are. Here are the ways that we can save some money. Ministry of Justice took that, but unfortunately it then took the approach of we will build, not buy any system. So nothing else out there is good enough for us. We will build our own system. And anyone with even the most passing knowledge of government IT and infrastructure projects will know that that means that whatever they did wouldn't be able to build it on time. It would probably be filled with bugs. It would cost a huge amount, and it probably wouldn't do what they wanted it to do in the first place. Now, I hate to say it, anyone could have presumed that was what was going to happen at the outset. And horrifically, that's what has now come to pass. The thing to draw a parallel with here is 20 years ago, the post office system, whereby people get all of their pensions and information via post office counters in the UK, everything from being able to access the National Savings Bank through to drawing information on different parts of government financial services and buying stamps and sending parcels, all was done through the post office. This is done through, you've got this network of post offices up and down the country, and they introduced a new IT system, Horizon, which was designed by Fujitsu, and sure enough, it didn't work, but it took about 15 years for the post office to be dragged through the courts, whereby rather than prosecuting and imprisoning sub-postmasters and saying, you're on the take, your books don't add up, it's clearly your fault, eventually it was established in court that no, it was the IT system that was screwing up, and that they shouldn't have been pursuing postmasters for this problem. They should instead have actually been replacing the system. Anyway, so that's the closest parallel we now have to this IT system being used in the Crown Courts. The problem is that this system should be recording all the information about the individuals who are coming up before the Crown Court. So this has cost about £300 million. The idea is that it would record case records. So if, for example, you've got someone in the magistrate's court and they're up on a driving charge, it would tell you other driving offences they may have had in the past, so that you could then make sure they add on to those records, see what their criminal history was. You get the idea. Fairly fundamental to the administration of justice. So, these are then some of the quotes we have now. One of these is from a Crown Court judge who wants to remain nameless for fear of being fired, I'm sure, along with several individuals. So this system, which has cost £300 million, Apparently, it loses records. It has a mind of its own. It is causing chaos. The judge says it is losing entries overnight, including guilty pleas. Clerks are having to spend ludicrous amounts of time and energy on the new platform because the system won't work to let them do what they have told it to do. As a result, people are getting stressed, frustrated with this system, and many of the court staff themselves, many of whom have been there for decades and on whom the system relies because they're the only people who know how some of these Byzantine Crown courts, magistrates courts operate, they are resigning, they are leaving, they have had enough. So most of the best skilled clerks are either stressed with this system or are then resigning as a result. And they're just wondering how this thing has been introduced and signed off when clearly it doesn't work. I mean, this is a sign that clearly it wasn't tested properly. Any form of adequate beta testing would have revealed fundamental problems like this from the outset, which suggests it was probably tested by people who didn't understand the system that the system was designed to administer in the first place. One clerk has said they spent at least twice as much time in preparation on a case as they would have done previously because they have to double up to be on court clerks because having to spend so much time to actually try and get this system to work and correct the errors that are on it before it then puts even new errors in there. Apparently, even the union representing magistrates court workers has said that the system routinely makes mistakes, meaning that in some cases the terms of orders to protect victims of harassment have not been recorded, leaving people at risk of further ongoing harassment. In other cases, charges have been magicked up and added to defendants' records, causing confusion for the prison authorities, i.e., people think they actually have longer to serve than they already have if their sentence has expired, or in other instances, you're free to go when in fact they should still be serving time. None of this adds up to a positive picture, and it's an incredible embarrassment for the Ministry of Justice and the government, which for years was telling us that this system would save time and was going to be the future, along with other digital systems that would be used in general to mean that the courts acted in a more joined up digital manner. Interestingly, I was at the British Legal Technology Forum a couple of weeks back. They were talking about the future of the professions. You get people there like Professor Richard Susskind talking about the future, and clearly it doesn't fill you with positive feelings for the future and the use of technology when we manage to tie ourselves in knots with the gradual introduction of technology like this.
Thanks, Peter. So moving on to our next story. So this one is looking at scam energy emails and text messages. And I think we're all aware at this point of the energy crisis that is upon us. And indeed, scammers are taking advantage here. So people are being warned to look out for fake emails and texts claiming to offer discounts on energy bills. A number of different scams have been circulating, including some of them that appear from the energy regulator Ofgem. The government had indeed announced that the £400 energy bill discount will be available to all households, but this will automatically appear and people should not be giving away personal details. And so, I mean, that you can see here why fraudsters are going to be targeting this, because it is now very well known that this discount is going to be applied and used. But I think there was that kind of unsure and uncertainty behind how this is going to be added, and this has been taken advantage of.
Exactly. This is actually the government being the victim of its own policy in wanting to provide these savings and supplements to the public in what it thinks is as easy and straightforward a manner as possible. But very often it's saying, you know, the government will have announced these things and said, you don't have to do anything. So earlier in the year, it announced a council tax rebate that in theory would give people more money in their accounts, and this would happen automatically. But of course, if you were on a direct debit to pay your council tax and then suddenly this money is paid back, you didn't have to do anything. The money would suddenly appear. But some people weren't even aware that the council tax rebate was happening. So then if you received a text saying, this is how you get your rebate, click here, you would, within reason, have gone, what rebate? And probably go ahead and click on it. Same thing here with different discounts being applied to households under the next wave of government support for the under the energy price cap. Again, you don't actually have to do anything, but fraudsters are taking advantage of people's A, lack of knowledge about this, and B, their general panic when they've been told through various scare stories over the last couple of months that energy bills would go up to £4,000, £6,000 a year, which won't now happen because of the government's energy price cap. But if you've seen these apocalyptic headlines and then you receive a text message or an email that says this is what you have to do to ensure your bill does not go up to £4,000 or £6,000, you're quite likely going to click on it. If you are frightened, worried, terrified, delete one of the above. So the fraudsters here are tapping into people's fear and uncertainty. It is worrying here that clearly they're doing this by sending out communications that purport to come from Ofgem, the government's energy regulator. And in this instance, okay, Action Fraud is putting up these notices. I'm sure different police authorities are putting up notices, as is the BBC, trying to draw awareness to it. But there will still probably be thousands of people who will end up clicking on these links and unknowingly will give hackers and fraudsters access to either their phone or end up providing personal data to these fraudsters, not realizing that they're speaking to fraudsters and not a government agency. And there will probably be massive losses as a result. And I'm afraid this is an example of where law enforcement needs to properly get on top of the risk from hackers and online fraud, because it still is not really devoting any serious resources to this, apart from just tapping the drum and saying, oh, Action Fraud will deal with this, because Action Fraud doesn't have the resources to deal with it, can't get communications out to the public to say don't do any of these things. And as a larger and larger section of the population is affected by these issues, it's almost like adopting a position of fiddling while Rome burns. I mean, there's lots of things that governments can do. I would have thought that stopping the public being victims of theft by any other name should be at the top of that. So there's got to be an urgent prioritization of this when it comes to expenditure on law enforcement, because otherwise every week we're going to be on our updates here saying about this is the fresh set of scams and fraud alerts as a result of the public being fleeced by online fraudsters, and it simply isn't good enough.
Thanks, Peter. So for our next story, we're going back to the court system. So witnesses can give evidence in criminal trials from outside the UK via WhatsApp when it is in the interest of justice, the Court of Appeal has said. So the popular messaging platform, which uses end-to-end encryption, is quote unquote capable of being regarded as sufficiently secure for giving evidence in open court, Lord Justice Holroyd held. So, I mean, there's a little bit to unpick here, both in relation to WhatsApp in general and then WhatsApp being used for court purposes. So I will pass over to Peter to make a start on unpicking that.
Where to begin? In some ways, this is very mixed messaging because, of course, UK National Cybersecurity Centre, MI5, security services all say you shouldn't use WhatsApp for business purposes. Yet in this instance, we're saying it's fine to give evidence, absolutely fine. So there's always the thinking here of, what one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing when it comes to different arms of government. And in this instance, we've now got the possibility of you being able to give evidence in criminal trials from outside the UK, which in theory makes sense. But when it's saying, oh, WhatsApp is fine for this, because they're just thinking, oh, because it's encrypted. Well, the point is, yes, it's encrypted, but it's encrypted between the devices involved and also a third-party server somewhere. So this could mean evidence in Crown Court matters being stored on servers in other third-party countries who may look at the information on there. We don't seem to be cognizant of that risk. If they'd said Signal can be used for this purpose because it's secure between the device sending the evidence and the device receiving it, that would make more sense. But we haven't got that far, have we? So, and this issue apparently has happened as a result of an appeal where someone was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment. Evidence has ended up being submitted via WhatsApp, and therefore that appeal has ended up being successful. Apparently, though, this is also relies on a fact-specific decision based on the circumstances of a particular case. And therefore, it's got the proviso on it where the judges emphasise the need to bear in mind the principle that one state should not seek to exercise the powers of its courts within the territory of another state without the permission of that other state. So it looks like it's still down to the judges to make a fact-specific decision. So this isn't a blanket, you can use WhatsApp all the time. And I would hope that the court system will think quite carefully about that. And instead, it should be, if possible, encouraging a more secure communication means than the one that's produced by Meta, that increasingly is not truly secure, even though it has the magic words encryption written on it.
Thanks, Peter. I think it's really important to mention there, specifically looking at the encryption side, because when I've been using certain messaging platforms such as Instagram and social media, I've actually seen a lot of adverts from WhatsApp kind of promoting this end-to-end encryption. Your data is safe. So I think it's really important that our listeners are understanding that end-to-end encryption is all well and good, but there is that middleman where there is that opportunity for things to happen to your data, and you won't necessarily know that it's been happening, just judging by the end-to-end encryption that's kind of shouted about.
Yes, your data remains secure between you, anyone else who reads it, and the platform providing it, in that instance, Meta. And we all know from increasing numbers of parliamentary hearings around the world that Meta ends up looking at that data and using it for sales and marketing purposes. So it's secure as far as that's concerned. And then it depends if that sounds to you like it's secure. Doesn't to me. But there you go. And that's just it. I mean, we're in a world now where you've got people thinking, oh, WhatsApp's secure because it's encrypted. No, it isn't. And also we now have TV adverts, adverts on YouTube, wherever, saying from Meta, saying use Meta Portal for business purposes because this makes sense, having all of your video calls in one place. It's Meta. That means that your confidential business conversations are being recorded somewhere on Meta's systems. Good luck with that. Don't be surprised if you then start being served with adverts based on what you talked about in what you thought was a secure online conversation. It should not be used, certainly, for the carrying out of any business in any highly regulated sectors, which is the message we keep on giving.
Thanks, Peter. So that links in very nicely to our next story. So TickTock could face a £27 million fine after an ICO investigation found that the company may have breached UK data protection law. Specifically looking at here, failing to protect children's privacy when using the TickTock platform. So this is interesting after we spoke about the huge Instagram fine only in our last podcast. So the ICO has issued TickTock and TickTock Information Technologies UK with a notice of intent, a legal document that precedes a potential fine. We are yet to hear from TickTock in relation to this yet. However, the ICO investigation found that the company may have processed the data of children under the age of 13 without appropriate parental consent. They have failed to provide proper information to its users in a concise, transparent and easily understood way, and processing special categories of data without legal grounds to do so. So there is a fair amount to unpick here, but I will first pass over to Peter to explain what special category data is and then go from there.
Indeed. So special category data includes anything that, for example, contains anything in relation to someone's religion or their political beliefs or racial or diversity data, special racial characteristics, all these sorts of things. That stuff is all supposed to be special category, so it should be looked after even more carefully and securely. And the point here is that we've potentially got that sort of information along with information related to children, defined as users below the age of 13, having their data used without appropriate parental consent, failing to provide proper information to its users in a concise, transparent and easily understood way, and all of that special category data being processed without legal grounds, i.e. a legal basis under Article 6 of GDPR as enacted in the UK through UK Data Protection Act 2018. So Article 6 concerns things like consent, contractual processing, legitimate interest, etc. And this is saying that TikTok hasn't bothered to work out what its legal grounds, its legal basis is for the processing of this data. Draw a breath. The problem here is that TikTok is the Chinese state by another name. So its servers are located all around the world, but a lot of which can be looked at by the Chinese state. That's the first issue. So it is, I mean, Meta's bad enough, but this is even worse because the Chinese state is going to be looking at it. Secondly, TikTok is incredibly popular with the next generation. So children use it. Lots of users below the age of 13. Lots of teenagers would rather sit on TikTok using that than watching what the rest of us call old-fashioned TV or even streaming. You know, they're not into watching the next HBO series or something on Amazon or Netflix. They are on YouTube. They are on TikTok all night. And then this is showing that some of the most basic requirements when it comes to processing the data of its own users is not being complied with. Hence the potential fine of £27 million. So will this go through to a final decision? Probably. Will TikTok? TikTok's turning over billions of dollars at the moment. Will it really pay an awful lot of attention to a £27 million fine? It might not. But the point here is this technology is in our homes. It is being used in families. I was listening today to an interview with a leading, well-known politician who was blithely saying, "Oh, I'm all over TikTok." And the interviewer goes, "Are you on there?" And she goes, "No, but my children are. And they tell me that different memes and things are going around on TikTok about me and different things that I do. And isn't that funny? And they're 13 and they're 15 and ha ha." And you think this is typifying that even in that politician's home, this system is being very widely used. And yet at the same time, this regulator is saying this system is driving a horse and cart through the legal and regulatory framework in the UK and Europe. That's a major problem. At this point, though, how do you roll it back? Because this thing has achieved such massive market penetration that now even, and Amelia, you were talking about platforms that you use, Instagram, etc. New users now are going to TikTok. So Meta is actually struggling to replace its existing users as they get progressively older with new users. So the Meta's user demographic is getting older as it is failing to attract those new users, and all the new users are going to platforms mostly like TikTok.
I think it's worth mentioning here as well, we recently covered a story in relation to TikTok and the UK Parliament. So this is where essentially the UK Parliament decided that it was a grand idea to use TikTok to kind of give an insight into what it's like. And like Peter has just mentioned, you're essentially hand feeding this information to the Chinese government because, yes, while they may have kind of various regulations, but because of the way the Chinese state is operated, they can essentially say, give us this information or you shut down. And here really we're saying that you've got children's data and many, many other users, including high-profile politicians, which are essentially giving their data away for free.
Exactly. To a foreign actor that is, certainly in the eyes of our new Prime Minister, she was saying that she wanted to have China treated in the same way as Russia as a threat to the UK. Yet we seem to be giving them huge volumes of our personal data and we don't seem to be particularly bothered about it.
On the balance of interest here, it is worth mentioning that the Commissioner's findings in this notice are provisional. And at this stage, no conclusion can be drawn whether there has been any breaches in data protection law. However, just because of the trends that we have been seeing with these platforms being persecuted at the moment, I think that this is certainly something that we will see kind of being very carefully considered, especially when we're thinking that it is the anniversary of the Children's Code being brought in. So that was looked at a year ago, and we're seeing more and more kind of legislation aimed at making the internet a safer place for children. So I certainly think that we're likely to have a crackdown on both TikTok and other platforms and their use of children's data. So moving on to our final story this week. This is looking at cryptocurrency. So Interpol has asked law enforcement agencies worldwide to find and arrest Do Kwon, founder of the failed cryptocurrency Terra. So the BBC Korean says a red notice has been issued for the 31-year-old who is accused of fraud over the company's $40 billion collapse. An arrest warrant was issued in his native South Korea earlier this month, with the culprit fleeing to Singapore in May. However, authorities are now saying that he's no longer there. I think this is really important to discuss because often in crypto there is that risk, because essentially you do not know where you're putting your money is going into the abyss, and you may or may not get it back. And we have seen this happen time and time again, and I'm sure Peter will discuss this in more detail. However, it is so unpredictable, and it's very easy to kind of use cryptocurrency as a front for a scam. So I'll pass over to Peter to go through this in more detail.
Thank you, Amelia. So this is a timely reminder of the fact that the cryptocurrency world out there is largely unregulated. In the UK, they've tried to get the Bank of England to operate a register to say, oh, if you're a legitimate cryptocurrency, you should be on this register. But I don't think the majority of people know to check those registers, etc. And in this instance, we've got a well-known cryptocurrency, Terra, that, people invested $40 billion into before it's ended up collapsing, and the guy who'd set it up, 31 years old, on the run. So at least Interpol have woken up to the problem and are trying to do something about it. However, it is very often the case that by the time Interpol and law enforcement get involved in these things, it's actually a year, 2 years, 3 years after the actual fraud was perpetrated and carried out. So, yes, they're trying to get hold of this person, but if you've got a couple of $1 billion, you could probably stay hidden fairly well. I think this is also, it's worth referring at this point to the OneCoin scam, and the founder of that, Dr. Ruja Ignatova, remains her whereabouts remain unaccounted for after she disappeared with several $1 billion. Even after she disappeared, investors continued to invest in the currency and continue to plow hundreds of millions of dollars into it. And interestingly, the investigative journalist Jamie Bartlett has just confirmed a second season of his podcast, The Missing Crypto Queen, looking at his continuing search for Dr. Ruja and the missing billions involved there. And that's out this autumn. It's on BBC Sounds. It's a BBC podcast, but you can also access it through Spotify, Amazon, the same audio channels that you're using to listen to us, Digital Law. You can also use to find The Missing Crypto Queen. I would highly recommend it to listen to the first season, which is well worth a listen, and then keep an eye out for those new episodes which will be coming out in the coming weeks, because by listening to them, you'll get a better idea about how the blockchain technology behind a cryptocurrency should work, for those who struggle to, and let's face it, I think the majority of us who may struggle to really understand what this technology is and how it works. And then understand how people's ignorance of the technology can be used to exploit them for financial gain and profit, which unfortunately is happening quite a bit. So a salutary lesson of the dangers when it comes to investing in cryptocurrency, and the need to carry out your due diligence before putting your money into a cryptocurrency, in the same way you should check before putting your money into any financial investment, to be honest.
Thanks, Peter. So that was our last story for today. A big thank you to Anson Evaluate for producing this webinar, and we will be back next week. So just a reminder, these episodes are available on all the streaming platforms like Peter just mentioned. So that's Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, YouTube, and the rest. And we will hopefully be back next week. And if you enjoyed our last mention of the crypto story, we have just released our newest blog post, which is looking at one specific cryptocurrency network. And if you want some more information on how they are operating, please feel free to read the blog post. And we hope to see you again next week.